Hello everyone. Tonight, we're diving into the shadows, exploring some of the creepiest stories from Reddit. These aren't just tales, they're experiences that real people have shared. So, grab a blanket, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The house that never let us be alone. Let me take you back to when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It was an ordinary sunny day. I got off the school bus, walked home, and by the time I got there, I was hot and needed to use the bathroom. Our house was small, one of those cozy 1950s-style brick homes you'd find in a quiet, rural neighborhood in the southeast. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. It wasn't big, maybe 1,000 square feet, so it wasn't exactly a place where someone could easily hide. I walked in through the back door, set my schoolbooks down, and headed straight to the bathroom. Nothing felt unusual, just another sunny afternoon. As I sat there, minding my business, I heard something. A voice. It called my name, my childhood nickname, to be exact. It came from somewhere outside the bathroom door, down the short hallway that ran through the middle of the house. And the voice sounded like my mom's. Here's the thing, my mom wasn't home. She was at work. I was alone. I froze. My heart started racing as my mind scrambled for an explanation. Could it be a burglar? Someone had broken in, maybe. But why would they know my nickname? I finished up as quickly as I could, bracing myself for what I might find on the other side of the door. When I opened it, I was expecting to see someone, anyone. But there was no one there. I checked every room, every corner. Nothing. The house was completely empty. Shaken, I bolted outside and waited by the driveway until my mom came home. I told her what had happened. She gave me a look, checked the house herself, and said, "You're imagining things." Maybe I was. But it didn't feel like my imagination. You'd think that would be the end of it, but no. That was just the beginning. A couple of years later, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, it happened again. This time, it was a cold, dreary weekend. My parents were out for the day, and my older brother, who was always working, wasn't home either. I had the house to myself. It was one of those peaceful, quiet afternoons where the dim light from outside made everything feel still. I decided to sit at the kitchen table to work on some homework. The kitchen was right next to the hallway that led to the bedrooms and the bathroom. The house was silent, except for the faint scratching of my pencil on paper. Then it happened. From the end of the hallway, a woman's voice called my name. It was the same nickname, clear as day. This time, I froze completely. I didn't even look up at first because my mind was racing. I thought, no one else is home. How is this happening? When I finally mustered the courage to look, there was nothing there. Just the hallway, quiet and still. My heart was pounding. I slowly closed my books, grabbed my jacket, and, without making a sound, slipped out the back door. I didn't stop until I was sitting in the standalone garage out back, huddled on my dad's old red lawnmower. I sat there for hours, shivering and staring at the back door, waiting for someone. Something, to come out. But no one did. When my parents finally got home, I ran to them, practically in tears, and told them everything. Once again, they checked the house, and once again, they found nothing. My mom told me, "It's just your imagination." Years have passed since those incidents, but the house never stopped feeling strange. Even now, I live in that same house to help take care of my mom. My dad passed away a few years ago, and my mom has started saying she hears him calling her name from the living room. She'll go in to check, thinking he needs something, only to find an empty room. She always brushes it off, saying, "It's just my imagination." But after everything I've experienced in this house, I'm not so sure. There's something about this place, something that makes it impossible to feel truly alone. My best friend's dad did this to me as a kid. When I was a kid in elementary school, I had one best friend, we'll call him Jim. Jim and I were inseparable. We spent so much time together, either at his house or mine. I loved when he came over. We'd play in my giant sandbox, mess around with my train set in the basement, or build snow forts in the winter. It was always a blast. But going to Jim's house, that was a different story. Don't get me wrong, his mom was amazing. She was soft-spoken, kind, and always went out of her way to make things fun for us. She'd take us to water parks, toy stores, museums, you name it. They even had a pool. But the reason I didn't love going there was because of his dad. Jim's dad was the complete opposite of his mom. He was this towering, gruff man with a booming voice that you could feel in your chest whenever he spoke. As a kid, he seemed larger than life, and not in a good way. All the neighborhood kids were intimidated by him. Me? I was downright terrified. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're walking down the hallway in Jim's house, just trying to get to the bathroom. Out of nowhere, his dad appears, coming from the other direction. He'd loom over you like a shadow. I'd usually try to shrink myself down and avoid eye contact, but sometimes he'd stop, spin around, and bark. "What are you doing?" His voice would boom through the hall, and I'd stammer something about needing the bathroom. But honestly, by then, I'd lost the need entirely. He'd laugh to himself and walk away, leaving me frozen in place. It didn't help that Jim's parents argued a lot. And when I say argued, I mean their voices could shake the walls. To her credit, Jim's mom wasn't afraid to stand her ground, but as kids, Jim and I would sit quietly in his room, worried that somehow we might get dragged into it. Thankfully, nothing ever seemed to escalate beyond the shouting, but the atmosphere in the house was always tense. Then, there were moments that still make me shiver when I think back. One summer, we were all hanging out by the pool, me, Jim, his mom, and his dad. Out of nowhere, Jim's dad grabbed me from behind, lifted me up, and tossed me straight into the deep end. The problem? I couldn't swim. I panicked, flailing in the water, until Jim's mom jumped in and pulled me out. I'll never forget the look she gave him. He just chuckled to himself and wandered off like it was no big deal. For me, though, it was terrifying. Another incident happened one winter. Jim, his sister, and I were sledding in the backyard when the zipper on my snowsuit broke. I went inside to tell Jim's mom, and she called down to his dad to fix it. Before I could say anything, I heard that deep voice bellow from the basement. "Send him down." I remember standing at the top of those basement stairs, feeling like I was about to walk into a lion's den. The basement was dimly lit, with just one bulb hanging in the workroom where he was. When I got down there, he was waiting, towering over his workbench. "Come here," he said. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to walk over. He inspected the zipper and then went to his bench to grab a pair of needle-nose pliers. He fixed the zipper, but then he did something that stuck with me for years. He bent down so we were face to face, opened the pliers, and gently placed them on my nose. He applied just enough pressure to make me squirm but not enough to hurt. Then, he chuckled, stood up, and walked away. I bolted out of that basement like my life depended on it. I didn't even stop until I was back outside with Jim and his sister. At the time, I didn't fully understand why it scared me so much, but looking back, yeah, it gives me chills. Fast forward to when I was about 15 or 16. By then, my family had moved away, and I hadn't spoken to Jim since the 4th grade. One day, my parents sat me down and told me something that made my stomach drop. Jim's dad had been arrested and put on a certain list for possessing inappropriate material on his computer. They asked me if anything strange had ever happened when I used to go to Jim's house. My mind immediately flashed back to the basement, the pliers, and the way he always seemed to enjoy making us feel uncomfortable. A chill ran down my spine. Thankfully, nothing worse ever happened to me, but the thought of what might have happened to others, it still haunts me to this day. The night we heard the unseen. This is a story I'll never forget, one that my family still talks about to this day. It all started one quiet evening in our apartment on the second floor. My mom and I were relaxing when we suddenly heard the front door downstairs open and slam shut. At first, we didn't think much of it, assuming it was my younger sister playing outside with her friend. But then it happened again, open, slam, slam. No one came up the stairs. My mom, a little annoyed, went downstairs to check. She told the girls, "If you're going to come in, do it, or stop playing with the door." But they looked confused and swore they hadn't touched it. My mom shrugged, came back upstairs, and we thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. The door slammed again, loud and sharp. Frustrated, my mom went back downstairs and told the girls, "If you want to come in, you need to knock." This time, she locked the door for good measure. Once again, the girls insisted they weren't touching it. And yet, we heard it again. The door opened and slammed. Only now, the door was locked. My mom checked the stairwell, and no one was there. That's when we started to feel uneasy. The sound kept coming at irregular intervals, loud and eerie. Eventually, the whole family gathered in the living room, trying to shake off the creeping fear. Then something else started happening, flashes of blue light flickering in the stairwell. It was quick, just a blink, but we all saw it. My mom, my brother, and I kept checking, hoping to find some logical explanation. We found nothing. My mom, ever calm, had a habit of lighting candles in the evening to create a cozy atmosphere. One of them was on the kitchen counter, not far from the stairwell. As we sat there, keeping an eye on the mysterious blue flashes, something else caught our attention. A shadow, short in stature, moved across the wall near the stairwell. We froze. It wasn't the shadow of someone we knew. My brother and I panicked and screamed. That was it for us. I insisted we all sleep in the same room that night. We huddled together in my sister's room, but I couldn't sleep. The unease from the evening lingered, and my mind kept replaying the strange shadow. The next morning, things took an even stranger turn. My mom woke up and came downstairs, visibly shaken. She told us she'd had the most vivid dream. In it, she was walking through a hospital and entered a small chapel. Inside, she saw her grandmother, someone she hadn't spoken to in over a decade due to a painful history. In the dream, her grandmother smiled and waved her over, apologizing for the hurt she had caused my mom in the past. She asked for forgiveness. My mom said yes and forgave her. Then, almost as if sensing something deeper, she asked, "What kind of flowers would you want on your grave?" Her grandmother smiled and replied, "Periwinkle." My mom woke up right after that. Still feeling the weight of the dream, my mom decided to call her mother, the first time in years. When she shared the dream, my grandmother told her something that gave us all chills. My great-grandmother was in hospice care, unresponsive. None of us knew. 3 days later, we got the news that my great-grandmother had passed away. My mom, remembering the dream, sent an arrangement of blue flowers to her grave, honoring her final wish. To this day, we don't know what was happening that evening. The slamming door, the flashes of light, the shadow, it all stopped after that night. But one thing is clear, some connections transcend the physical world. And sometimes, they bring closure in ways we can't explain.